sir. Friends, at this time we are going to begin the funeral services for Isabel Marie Soffer. If you have a cell phone or a pager, I would ask for you to please take a moment to turn it off or place it in the silent mode. And officiating today's services will be Rabbi Emeritus Alan Kensky and Cantor Pavel Reutman from Beth Hillel B'nai Emunah.
Adonai roi lo echsar bin od sheyarbitzeni anemei menuchot yinach aleini nafshi shovev yishovev Yancheni v'maglei tzedek, Yancheni v'maglei tzedek, leman shemo, kam ki elech, begeit salmavet, lo yirhara, כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צוררי, תשענת Vashemin roshi kosi revaya Achtov vachesed yerdefoni Kol yemei hayai V'shavti beveit Adonai לאורך ימים, אדוני רואי לא אחסר, אדוני רואי לא אחסר.
Begin with the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God has me lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside the still waters. God guides me on paths of righteousness. God revives my soul for the sake of God's glory. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod do comfort me. You set a table in sight of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. I read from the book of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. I read the beautiful reading, A Woman of Valor, from the book of Proverbs. Eshet chayil mi yimtza, v'rachok mipninim michra. A woman of valor who can find? Her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and nothing shall he lack. She renders him good and not evil all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is robed in strength and dignity and cheerfully faces whatever may come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband too, and he praises her. Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Place before her the fruit of her hands. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. Ribono shel olam, Almighty God, Lord of living and the dead, the hearts of your children who mourn are heavy with grief. Give them comfort. Help them to remember the triumph and the joy in the life of Isabel Soffer. Help them to treasure what is theirs because Isabel lived. Help them to meet grief with courage, to confront the angel of death with life. When despair threatens, when faith falters, sustain us all, O Lord, our refuge and our strength, our ever-present help, and let us say, Amen. The concluding lines of the reading A Woman of Valor, which I just read from the book of Proverbs, offer perhaps the greatest praise to this valorous figure. We read, her children rise to praise her. We will do this here today as I call on Isabel's son, Gil Soffer, to deliver a eulogy on behalf of himself, his brother Jonathan, and his brother Josh, and other members of the family who then follow. Gil Soffer.
So I will begin by reading a eulogy that my brother Jonathan prepared and asked me to read on the clearly mistaken assumption that I'll be able to get through it more easily than he would, but I'm going to do my best. And then I will read one that I prepared. And let me first say how touched I am to see the people who are here. It's a real testament to my mom. So from John, for those who knew my mom, her qualities are quite apparent. Gifted teacher, determined tennis player, and highly talented pianist. As I reflected the past few weeks on what Mom meant to me, I started to see a picture of her I hadn't appreciated before. My fondest memories of Mom were simply the manner in which she embraced my friends when I was growing up. You see, my mom always fancied herself as a tomboy, played sandlot baseball with the boys when she was a girl, so she never flinched when we dragged in lizards or tadpoles into the house. She was so at ease with my buddies, eager to warmly welcome them with a big smile, no matter if they were drinking beer or worse, and tossing frisbees into the yard. She was easily the favorite mom among my friends. As I smiled, reflecting on those times, I started seeing a clearer picture of Mom. Sure, we had a bond like a buddy, eager to talk sports or catch up on what the guys were up to, but that was only my side of Mom. She had many sides. Because Mom was such a gifted musician as well as a brilliant mind, she understood all too well the heartbeat of an artist and philosopher. We just happened to have such a combination of those passions in my brother Josh, and my mom could lean into conversations with him about Derrida, Heidegger, and questions of being that would cause great headaches to lesser minds. That was Josh's side of Mom. Mom could teach and did it damn well. When my younger brother Gil started coming into his own as a star student, John wrote this. My mom tapped into that strength, running the school library during his entire middle and high school career, culminating in teaching his AP English class, where Gil had her all to himself because he was the only student. That was Gil's side of mom. My mom was a class act and could pivot from tomboy to diplomat with ease. As Dad traversed the world, expanding the reaches of his medical association to far-off international regions, Mom mingled effortlessly at countless convocations and receptions. She teamed with Dad in making lifelong friendships with foreign dignitaries and physicians who called to this very day to say hello. Now I see the different sides Mom shared with her boys, and I can love and admire her even more for that. And now my eulogy. It's not an easy thing to give a eulogy for my mom. And not just because, don't worry, no, stay, I'm going to get through it. I designated Gabriella my backup, I'm not there. And not just because I am heartbroken. Her life was so consequential. She inspired so many people. She knew so much about and was so accomplished at so many things that it's impossible to tell her story and what she meant in 5 or 10 minutes. But I will do my best. I want to begin with her greatest legacy, the thousands of students she has taught over the years, and I see some here. My mom taught generations of students from grade school through high school. She started at the library at Solomon Schechter Day School in Northbrook, and then taught grammar school and high school for years at Schechter. And because she relished a challenge, she also taught English at the Chicago Academy for the Arts, schlepping downtown every day to and from Glenview to teach kids whose passion wasn't English, but dancing and art and music. Almost to a person, the students there, the students at Schechter, the students she had everywhere said exactly the same thing. She was the best English teacher, and often simply the best teacher they had ever had. My wife Becky and I can't go a week without running into one of her former students who say she inspired them to become writers or journalists or teachers. They still recite Portia's speech from Act 1, Scene 4 of The Merchant of Venice as if my mom had taught it to them just yesterday. They loved her, and they feared her a little bit. Her brilliance, her teaching style, her commitment to the job. She left an indelible mark on them forever. And as my mom would say, I know whereof I speak, because as you heard, she taught me too, all through high school. And in fact, in my senior year of high school, I was the only student in one of those English classes, and she was the only teacher. And I can tell you our principal still remembers walking past and hearing my mom scold me for staying out too late the night before and shirking my homework. Even after retiring from teaching school, she continued to teach and inspire. She wrote book reviews of newly published novels. She led book clubs and poetry discussions all across the North Shore. She led the chorus, and she performed improv in the retirement community where she lived. She was a born teacher. But my mom was a woman of many talents and many interests beyond teaching. She was an accomplished musician and could play a vast repertoire of Chopin pieces by heart. She was an avid tennis player into her 70s with a brutally effective backhand that struck fear into the hearts of her opponents. She joined my dad for weekly Bible study sessions with their friends, enriching each meeting with her scholarship. She also had a passionate love for Israel, and she didn't just talk the talk. In 1973, we moved to Israel as a family. She picked up and she left her home, her friends, her native language, to support a country, without hesitation, to support a country and a people that she deeply loved. Now, 3 months after we arrived, the Yom Kippur War broke out, and she volunteered at the local post office screening incoming mail for letter bombs. Not once did she express fear or regret or make us feel afraid or at risk. On her last day on the job, after the war ended, the other post office employees got on their bicycles, rode to our house in a mini parade to express their appreciation to my mom. She told this story often. She was very proud of it. I could say so much more, but of course my mom taught me better than that I should not drone on, and I won't. So let me just say this. For all her accomplishments, the simple truth is that I loved her and will miss her terribly. I will miss watching The Godfather for the 30th time with her and dissecting each sentence and line. I will miss talking to her about quantum mechanics and black holes and other insanely complicated things that she always understood and I never understood. I will miss reading her the opening line, sometimes the opening word, of almost any poem, and hearing her recite the rest by heart, flawlessly, which incredibly she did until nearly the last day of her life. I will miss her devotion to my dad through 67 years of marriage, and to us, her 3 boys, for the entirety of our lives. Most of all, I will miss her telling me that everything will be just fine, and my family knows this phrase. Whenever I was sure things wouldn't be fine, she would say, everything will be just fine. That was her mantra, and that is who she was to me and my family, a great source of strength, of comfort, of love, and we will miss her every day. So finally, people who know my mom know how much she loved Shakespeare. And I can't think of a better way to honor my mom today than by paraphrasing one of her favorite plays, one of her favorite lines from one of her favorite plays, Julius Caesar. Her life was gentle, and the elements so mixed in her that nature might stand up and say, should never do this to Shakespeare, that nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was a woman.
Now call on Isabel's granddaughter, Gabriela Soffer.
We're going on a lion hunt. We're going to catch a big one. We're not scared. We've been there before. My grandmother would constantly chant, even from the couch, stomping and charging her arms forward to replicate the journey. Adventure was one of her many passions, right alongside poetry, and the intersection of the two in going on a lion hunt surely contributed to its frequency. Yet what she seemed to love most was how my sister, Mia, and I responded, at first by learning the rhyme, and gradually by laughing at her dramatic renditions of it. She cherished our smiles and wanted to ensure she always earned them. Each time she visited the house, she would make sure to check in with us. "How is my car treating you?" she would ask, referring to her 2004 Lexus passed down to me when I received my license. Or, "Are you still playing tennis?" She wanted to make sure I was, given we shared a tremendous love for the sport and are possibly two of the only people I know with stronger backhands than forehands. I was reminded of her thoughtfulness a couple of weeks ago when she had already begun hospice, and Mia and I visited for the first time. Her face lit up as we entered the room, and immediately she asked, "How are you doing?" For someone who had endured as much as she had in the past week, it made me chuckle, in a heartwarming way, to realize that her focus was pinned on us regardless of the circumstances. She continued to ask how we were until the moment she no longer could. Although I know Grandma was a beloved teacher, leader, and fearless post office worker in Israel during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, to me, she was simply a grandmother who cared. Whatever lion hunt we may have needed to go on, she would have held our hands, and that is all that matters.
Now call on granddaughter Mia Soffer.
As someone who enjoyed classic literature and the arts as much as I do, it meant so much to me that my grandmother shared my passion for it. In the car on the way home after my fall musical, she emphasized how wonderfully I had performed and how marvelous the music had been. She had always expressed interest in my love for music and would regularly ask me to sing for her. Near the end of her life, when communication became more limited, I decided to sing and play Hatikva in hopes that it would bring her some joy. I was touched when she began to sing along with me. It was the first time she had responded to anything in hours, and the way her eyes lit up as she conducted and sang with me reminded me of our connection through music. I love my grandmother deeply, and I will miss her so much.
Now call on Isabel's son, Josh Soffer.
These are thoughts of my mother, impressions. I think they tie into the notion of discussion of time in Ecclesiastes in a certain sense, I'm realizing now. So thoughts of my mother, Brooklyn-born, depression baby, never goes hungry because dad is jack of many trades. Life starts to move. Youngest child, frantically twirling her abundant curls at the kitchen table to show mother her disapproval. Life moves faster now. Halcyon summers at glorious Crystal Beach, Ontario, with Jack Benny, Allen's Alley, and Fibber McGee and Molly on the radio. 50s Syracuse sorority girl catches eligible young Midwestern doctor, and life is moving fast as a bullet. Sad goodbye to Rochester, New York, kin, and hello to unknowables of new life in 1960 Chicago suburbia. 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, diapers, PTA, mother's helpers, and tennis to keep that amazingly glamorous figure. A passion for literature and sharing magical stories with her children elevates life beyond the drudgeries of motherhood and starts a fire in me that never stops burning. With us kids grown and out of the house, the pace of life now finds its sweet spot for a long stretch as a teaching career follows motherhood. Eventually, aging plays a trick on time as life circles back on itself. The vulnerability, confusion, and fear that infirmity brings connects these later years with the first years. Life seems to move backwards, but it's important to notice that the movement of life's circle towards its completion doesn't erase the previous stages of its progress. When my mother reached out her hand for help in recent years, wondering who would take care of her, it wasn't her mother from distant memory responding to the curly-haired little girl of long ago, as if time had indeed reversed itself. It was her family taking my mother's hand, the family whose love she earned, cultivated, and sustained over many years. Thank you.
Our sages taught that words that come from the heart enter other hearts. These beautiful words of praise offered by Gil, by Gabriella, by Mia, and by Josh, they all came from the heart, and as such they touch us all today. Isabel is mourned deeply today by her beloved life partner, Al, by Jonathan and Margaret, by Josh, and by Gil and Becky. Their deep love for their mother was reflected in their words. In Isabel's nurturing and teaching them, she has left her mark on them and has helped make them who they are today. And Isabel has similarly touched her grandchildren, Talia, Jacob, Gabriella, and Mia, and they too deeply mourn their grandmother's passing. You've heard Talia shared with us how her grandmother lit up any room she was in, how she read to her as a child, and how she sparked her own love of reading. Isabel is mourned deeply today by her sister Judy, who is very much with us in spirit today, as well as by her extended family. Isabel Soffer was indeed a modern woman of valor. She was a person of many gifts and talents, and she gave of herself generously as she shared those gifts with those around her. We have heard of Isabel's teaching at the Solomon Schechter Day School and many other venues, how she excelled as a teacher, how she inspired her students, how she is praised by them. Our sages well understood the power of the teacher to mold minds and to inspire students to further learning. The sages go as far as to say that if you have taught someone, it is reckoned as if you have brought them into the world. Just think of the many minds that Isabel Soffer inspired and taught, and the legacy of her teaching that endures and bears fruit every day. How blessed are we that Isabel taught over a generation of students in our community. As I go back to the reading of the Woman of Valor, the first praise offered on her behalf speaks of her devotion to her husband. In the words of the chapter, her husband trusts in her. Our Isabel was a most devoted and loving life partner to her beloved Al. For 67 years, they supported one another in all ways. Isabel had a full professional life of her own, but at the same time, she accompanied Al at his conferences and gatherings. Their marriage was a fulfillment of the biblical verse, a helpmate unto him, Ezer kenegdo. As we now understand and interpret the verse, we take it to mean that a husband and wife stand facing one another as total equals and in full support of one another. I could feel this as I observed Al and Isabel in our synagogue. My most vivid memories of Isabel is of her in the synagogue, greeting me warmly at the conclusion of services, enjoying the Kiddush with a group of friends, kibitzing and socializing in an animated fashion with them. Clearly, a key member of the group. In their 67 years of marriage, Isabel and Al together built a beautiful home and family. Isabel nurtured a beautiful garden that she labored over tenderly. She cultivated orchids, with one of her prized orchids winning an award. Isabel loved nature. She set out bird feeders in her yard. Together, Isabel and Al enjoyed life. They traveled around the world. They enjoyed fishing. Isabel pursued tennis with passion and determination. And while living at the V, she participated in and enjoyed improv. Isabel was, as you have heard, passionate about literature and music. The classical piano pieces were in her fingers to the last months, and she could recite long poems by heart. Isabel was passionate about her teaching, about her community, and was deeply attached to the state of Israel. As you have heard, Isabel and Al's love of Israel propelled them to move to Israel in 1973, and they didn't flinch during the trying days of the Yom Kippur War. It is fitting that one of the last public events that Isabel attended was a celebration of the 60th anniversary of the Solomon Schechter Day School of Chicago, when Isabel proudly stood and was recognized along with other former teachers at the school. Isabel's love of Solomon Schechter Day School was indeed great. Isabel's legacy will live on in her students, in her friends, and above all, in her family. You will be inspired by her teachings, by her example, and by the way she lived her life. Isabel Soffer was a blessing in the lives of all who knew her, and her memory will be for a blessing. As many of you know, we are now in a special period of the Jewish year, the period of the 7 weeks of comfort, when we read prophecies of comforting in the synagogue, that follows the period of gloom that led up to the 9th of Av, when we marked the destruction of the 2 temples of Jerusalem and the subsequent exile of our people. Following our mourning of the destruction, we read these beautiful prophecies that speak of rebirth and renewal. And as we here march through this period of comfort and consolation, may all of us come together to comfort the family of Isabel Soffer on their loss. May we support our beloved Al at this time, and may we offer words of comfort to Isabel's dear family. May the soul of Isabel Soffer, Elisheva bat Fischel ve'ema, be bound in the bond of everlasting life. Tehi nishmata tzrura b'tzror hachayim. And let us say, Amen. Please rise for the memorial prayer.
מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים ודחורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזכירים. את נשמת אלישבע בת פישל ואמה, שחלקה לעולמה, בגן עדן היא מנוחתה, הנבא לרחמים, הסתירך בסדר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן.
O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of Isabel Soffer, Elisheva bat Fischel ve'ema, who has gone to her eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that she performed in the land of the living. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is her portion. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Friends, this concludes our services here at the chapel. The interment and burial services will continue at West Lawn Cemetery in Norridge. For those of you traveling with us in the funeral procession to the cemetery, please keep the following safety precautions in mind. Please make sure that your bright headlights and your four-way hazard flashers are on at all times. Please be sure to obtain an orange funeral safety sticker for your windshield and we will be providing several of the cars in the procession with a magnetic orange flag to be placed on top of your car. Please travel as close as safety permits to the car in front of you to avoid any gaps in our procession. For your own safety and security, I would suggest not speaking or texting while driving to the cemetery in the funeral procession. As we do make our way through the intersections, if the car in front of you goes through the intersection, please proceed with caution. Feel free to use your horn liberally, but please make every effort to continue to follow the car in front of you as we go to the cemetery. Following the interment, the family will be returning to the Soffer residence at 899 Valley Road in Glencoe. They'll be together for Shiva today upon their return from the cemetery until 6 p.m., and Sunday and Monday from 5 until 8 p.m. And the family has also requested any memorial contributions in her memory to Solomon Schechter Day School. All of that information regarding the memorial contributions and Shiva is available in the service folder that you should have received when you came into the chapel today. And if you did not receive one, we do have those for you as you leave. And for those of you joining us online, that information is also available on our website. The following individuals have been asked to serve as pallbearers: Harold Mann and Daryl Schrock. And at this time, I would ask everyone to please rise and stand in place as we ask for the pallbearers to come forward, as we escort the casket, the family, and the clergy from the chapel. Thank you.